The prototype short Scion first flew from Gravesend Aerodrome on the 18th of August 1933. It was the latest product of Short Brothers, founded in 1908 and probably best known for building flying boats. The prototype Scion, along with the first 4 production aircraft, designated Mark Is, were built in Short Brothers Seaplane Works on the east bank of the River Medway at Rochester. Test flying was carried out by John Lancaster Parker, seen here in the cockpit of a short Calcutta flying boat with the Austrian corporal's Nemesis. In the following year, 1934, Short Brothers leased the newly opened Rochester Municipal Airport. All land plane manufacture and test flying moved to a new factory on the site. For many years, Short Brothers had pioneered the use of metal construction, and the Scion was no exception. The fuselage was largely welded steel tube, with the wings and empennage made from duralumin, a brand of aluminium alloy. Wood was only used for formers and fairings, and the entire aircraft was covered in fabric. With a single pilot up front and 2 80 horsepower Popjoy R engines, the Scion 1 could carry 5 passengers, with provision for a 6th passenger on a folding seat, depending on fuel load. All production Scions were fitted with 2 90 horsepower Popjoy Niagara motors. Short Brothers had purchased a controlling interest in Popjoy Air Motors, the company moving south to a new factory at Rochester Airport. These photographs were taken at Rochester in 1934. The aircraft is the second production Scion, which was delivered to the grandiosely named Lundy and Atlantic Coast Airlines Limited at Barnstaple in North Devon. After test flying on floats, the third production machine was shipped to Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea to be used for aerial survey work. In 1935, the Scion was updated to produce the Scion 2. Main differences were raised engine nacelles, with the thrust line being coincident with the chord line, improved windscreen, improved side windows, and fixed seating for 6. In 1936, Charles Exton Gardner, accompanied by school friend Peter Mussell, flew this Scion from Rochester to India to take part in the Viceroy's Challenge Cup air race. They came a credible 6th in the race and arrived back in Rochester in March, the aircraft and engines having performed faultlessly throughout the 16,000-mile adventure. That particular Scion perhaps deserved a better fate. In May 1936, it hit a hedge whilst pleasure flying near Coventry. It was repaired, but then in July 1936, it was written off properly at Porthcawl. The Scion was proving popular for airline and air taxi work. This example, with a candy-striped tail, was purchased by Plymouth Airports Limited, part of the Whitney Strait organisation. This photograph, taken at Ramsgate Airport in Kent, is particularly pleasing. In the background is a 2-cylinder Aeronca. In 1935, 2 Scions were ordered by Adelaide Airways Limited in Australia. The first aircraft, seen here, didn't last long. In service for less than 3 months, the starboard engine seized, and in the subsequent forced landing the aircraft overturned. It was sold back to the manufacturer, who rebuilt it and sold it on to Arabian Airways. It lasted 6 weeks with Arabian Airways, being written off in a crash in Aden. The second aircraft supplied lasted a lot longer than the first, as did the third aircraft, which was supplied by Popjoy Air Motors as a replacement for the first write-off. The last 6 Scions to be built, including the third Australian machine and the 2 supplied to Palestine Airways in Tel Aviv, were built under licence by Popjoy Air Motors, a delightfully nebulous fact, given that they were still built at Rochester and probably in the same shed. Palestine Airways had been formed by Zionist Pinhas Rutenberg, but was run by Imperial Airways and continued to do so until 1940, when the aircraft were impressed by the Air Ministry. Of the 22 short Scions produced, 14 were impressed into military service, and none of that 14 survived the war. However, 3 short Scions survive. The first floatplane, supplied to Major Hemmings in Port Moresby, ended up in Australia in airline service with Marshall Airways. After withdrawal, it was stored in their hangar for nearly 20 years and then sold to Sir William Roberts at Strathallan in Scotland. The aeroplane is now in storage at the Ulster Folk and Transport Museum in Northern Ireland and said to be in very poor condition. The last Scion built was this one. Ordered by a company in Sierra Leone and test flown on floats, it was never delivered, instead being stored at the Rochester Works until 1940. Converted to a land plane, it was leased to the Air Ministry, although still civilian registered, and operated by the Royal Air Force until 1945. Having changed hands several times post-war, by the 1960s it was out of use, and by the 1970s extremely derelict. It's now under restoration to an extremely high museum standard by the Medway Aircraft Preservation Society at Rochester Airport, a mere stone's throw across the airfield from where it was built. The third survivor is this one, supplied by Pobjoy Air Motors to Adelaide Airways after their first aircraft was badly damaged in a forced landing. By 1946 it belonged to Norman Paget in Victoria. He applied to the Directorate of Civil Aviation to replace the Pobjoy Niagara 3s with a pair of 90 horsepower Gypsy Minor engines. After consultation with Short Brothers, this was approved. Later, in 1951, the aircraft was blown over in a storm. The wreck was sold to Stan Doggett, who towed it several hundred miles on its own wheels behind his Ford pickup truck. By 1957 the rebuild was complete and the aircraft was chartered to the Royal Flying Doctor Service, although this contract was terminated the following year when the service acquired their own Cessna 180 aircraft. The Scion hasn't flown since 1958, but after changing hands several times, it's now under rebuild to flying condition in New South Wales. Thank you for watching.